Coming up on My Week, restoring civility in government, philanthropy, and the governor's 21st Century Commission reports take center stage at the Detroit Regional Chamber's Mackinac Policy Conference. We've got it all covered for you, and My Week from Mackinac Island starts right now.
Support for My Week at the Mackinac Policy Conference is brought to you by Masco Corporation Foundation, DTE Energy Foundation, ITC Holdings Corporation, PVS Chemicals, and by...
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We are in the parlor of the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, the site of the Detroit Regional Chamber's Mackinac Policy Conference. It's the second day of the gathering, and the conversation centered on several topics, including early childhood education, the state's economy, and civility in politics. Coming up, we'll talk about the renewed call for compromise and respect in government, plus the Michigan 21st Century Commission reports. I'll talk with Governor Snyder about the findings and the recommendations there. And the under-the-radar Michigan team checks in with the Grand Hotel's chef to find out how he prepares for the hundreds of people here at the conference. It is all coming up for you. So let's bring in our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Hey guys, day two.
Hey.
It's good to see you.
Here we go.
In the parlor. All right, so a couple little things that stood out for you today. Nolan, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I wrote a column in today's Detroit News talking about the governor and sort of his presence here, as well as sort of his overall demeanor in office.
Kind of leadership role?
Yeah, you know, Flint, I think, took the starch out of him. He's never fully recovered. He certainly doesn't sell his policies, advocate for what he wants for Michigan in the same manner he did. Steve and I were talking, it's been a year and a half since he's been in to see either one of us for an editorial board. And I mentioned that during our interview with him yesterday. He said, well, you know, it's a communications problem. I think it's more than that. I think, you know, he bunkered up after Flint, and he's been very cautious about coming out. Now, you talk to people, and he's still very much engaged behind the scenes.
And he was on stage multiple times today.
He was, and I give him credit for that. But this is not the same governor who came up here.
No.
And part of that second term, you know, the news worn off him. But he's dealt with a lot of frustrations apart from Flint. You know, with the legislature, he's got a real recalcitrant legislature that is blocking a lot of the things he'd like to do, and really on the budget in particular, ignoring him.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit later about the budget, and also, but he is pretty still passionate about these 21st Century Commission reports that they put out, but it's going to remain to be seen how much political strength and oomph he's got behind it to get some of those things done.
I talked with the governor briefly this morning as well for an interview, and I was shocked at, you know, his answer to questions like, what do you want to get done in this last, he's got 18 months left in office. That is a lot of time. His answers to the things that he wants to do are all I mean, they were important, but they were little things. There's nothing left that's really driving this guy to sort of do the job. So,
but these commission reports could do that, and they could actually cement his legacy. There's some good ideas in there.
And we will talk about that a little bit later on, because I did talk to the governor as well. Stephen, what stuck out for you today?
Well, my column today was about Mayor Mike Duggan's address to everyone yesterday, and sort of the state of sort of his mayoralty as he asks voters for another 4 years. I think there's a really interesting tension between the things that he's gotten done that he can absolutely claim credit for, and the many, many other things that are still left undone, and the many, many people who will not feel the effects of the things that are already done. What do those people do? How do they look at this race and this choice that they're going to have? I think, as I said in the column, if he faced a more credible, experienced opponent in the fall, and there don't appear to be any on the ballot, we don't know for sure, I think he could be really pushed. He could be really challenged to make the case that the pace of change is quick enough that it'll eventually catch up to everyone.
You know, it's an interesting take, too, because still people are talking about his speech yesterday on Wednesday as one of the real highlights of the conference. Something that stuck out to me today is the continued huge role that philanthropy is playing, not only in the city of Detroit, but across the state of Michigan. You had Kresge and Kellogg making announcements today about a huge early childhood initiative in the city of Detroit. And also the Ford Foundation, they are going to have an officer actually here in the city of Detroit and start to spend some of that capital. So, again, it's amazing to see the role that philanthropy is playing, and sometimes plugging the holes where maybe government has fallen short.
And that's a different role for philanthropy that emerged out of the Detroit bankruptcy and its governing crisis. They felt they had to step up and do things that government normally would do, not just in terms of providing services, but also in providing a strategic vision for the city. And you look at what the Kresge Foundation has done and some of the other foundations, it's been remarkable what they've gotten their boards to do in terms of contributing to this Detroit comeback, including the grand bargain that settled the bankruptcy.
A lot of a broader reach.
I mean, they have all said before that they had to step in when government melted down in Detroit to just sustain things the way they were. Now that we have competent management back in place and have had it now for a while, I think at some point we start asking the question about how long will this last? How long will these foundations spend as much money as they do trying to help the city come back?
They might say as long as it takes.
Well, right now they're protecting their investment. They've got a lot of money investment, and I don't think you're going to see them back away anytime quickly.
All right, we got a bunch of stuff to get to tonight, so let's get going. Turning to politics, one of the pillars at this year's conference is restoring civility in American politics. I spoke with 3 of Michigan's congressional leaders about the mood these days in Washington.
The atmosphere can be best described as a bit dysfunctional at the moment. We've got a lot of investigations going on. Russia, of course. The media really is focused on, kind of a headline a day. The administration hasn't filled a lot of key jobs yet, so we're trying to work on our agenda, but there's an awful lot of distractions, that's for sure.
Distractions. Congresswoman, how do you guess I mean, try to get people's trust back in that government actually works right now?
Well, one of the reasons I was one of the people that predicted that Donald Trump could become president, because I thought there were 2 things. One, he understood. I think if you're in Michigan, you haven't recovered from 2008, 2009, and what happened to the industry. And that economic anxiety of could it happen to me again on trade bills, that you see it there. People were worried about their pensions, whether they're going to be able to retire and have a secure and safe retirement. So I think that is one issue that people are really deeply concerned about. And in Washington, right before we came home, people were talking, and I think it's very important. National security needs to be one of our #1 priorities. But I don't think the investigations that are going on right now, I do not believe should be partisan. I think we have to follow the facts. I think it's very important. I know for a fact that I was hacked by the Russians. They told me that last summer. We cannot let a foreign government interfere with what is happening, but we have to be Twotrack. We got to worry about jobs right now and making sure our state stays strong.
Do you feel there is a distraction like that? There is the Twotrack of what's happening with some of the investigations. James Comey is expected to testify next week.
It's taking the headlines. I'm like, I think a good number of my colleagues. Let's find out what the answers are. Let the investigation take us where it is, where it's going. I supported the picking of an independent counsel. It's going to probably slow things down a little bit just because the legal issues. Is someone going to get immunity? Gearing up the staff. Who's got power? But at the end of the day, we need to find out what the answer is, and it take as long as it takes.
You know, I think it was really interesting in talking to many members of the congressional delegation that have been up here on Mackinac Island. They've all been very careful to say, well, in the bipartisan, leadership that we've done here, in reaching across the aisle, they've been very careful to say, look, we're trying to work with each other as much as possible, especially here in Michigan. They're uniting behind several issues in terms of like the Sioux Locks, or if you're talking about Great Lakes restoration funding, and trying to tell people, no, it's not as bad as you think when it comes to civility or lack thereof in politics, Nolan.
Well, we need vigorous, passionate debate in our society, particularly in these times when there are stark differences on critical issues.
Oh, yeah, but isn't there a difference between vigorous, passionate debate and absolute obnoxiousness?
To be constructive and civil. And, you know, our society, you know, as a whole is a lot less civil for a lot of reasons. You can blame social media or whatever. And so you have to ask, does our society reflect what's going on in Washington, or does Washington reflect us? We're not setting very good examples anywhere in terms of civility.
What do you think?
Well, you know, I think there is a strain of real cynicism and resentment on both sides of the political aisle of the other side. And I think Nolan's right. The question is, which reflects which? Is it Washington reflecting us, or us reflecting Washington? But I do think that there is this sort of expediency, this political expediency to the idea of capitalizing on that cynicism and resentment that we see politicians indulging. The current occupant of the Oval Office being, you know, one of the chief offenders of that, as opposed to saying, okay, I get that you're upset. I get that you feel left out. Let's turn that into some sort of hopeful direction and message, which requires a different kind of political mind.
By concentrating on that up here, do you think there has been a change, or do you think that it leads to some kind of change of their conversations here in Michigan?
Well, Steve and I were talking about this before.
And you guys are pretty civil with each other most of the time.
But
even when we're not, it's just whatever.
We're also hosting tonight a bourbon night, and the idea for these bourbon nights came out of our belief that people from different views ought to be able to get together and socialize and talk and get to know each other, politics aside. And we're now a pillar of the conference, Steve. Who knew?
They're stealing from us.
Who knew
Drink
bourbon could be so vital and important?
That's right. It brings people
You know what?
together.
I would actually add to that, it's listening. I think people have lost the art of listening.
What'd you say?
And actually, exactly. See? Nolan never listens to me. All right. Turning now to another big topic on the island, the state budget. One of the major sticking points is whether the teachers' pension system should be overhauled. I talked with Senator Arlen Meekoff and Representative Sam Singh about proposed legislation that would replace future members' pensions with a type of 401k plan. Take a listen.
Everybody who's in the system is constitutionally guaranteed to get their pension. No one's taking anybody's pension away. What we're saying is, into the future, we want a more modern, an ability for, in the proposal we're talking about, as much as 10% of their pay that they can invest on their own and secure their own retirement. Pensions aren't the draw for people to come to be a teacher, because half of the people leave before they're ever vested, and there's a pension now. So that isn't what's drawing people to be there. Teachers are there because they want to be a teacher. And again, given the affordability of that, we have to cut our credit card and say no more debt and not make minimum payments, and not let that debt accrue longer. We have to maximize that so that we have all the ability to invest in other things we'd like to do too. We owe the pension stuff. We owe it, and we will pay it. Constitutionally, we must pay it. But going forward, we have to do something different, or we'll consume, right now it consumes 36 cents of every dollar spent in education. It will be more than that if we don't change.
It seems like that you have an agreement on philosophy in terms of we have to do something about it, but are we doing this, are we doing it in the right way, looking at what some of the projections are in terms of the money that we're going to have to put out over the next 5-10 years or so? How would you respond to that?
I think that's the big concern. We're very willing to have a conversation about how we make the teacher retirement program more solvent, but this idea of trying to close the program down, which is going to cost us $46 billion over the long term, but what it basically does is takes $500 million out of schools every year. So a generation of kids won't have those dollars and resources in their classroom. And so for us, we'd rather talk about how we make the system more solvent, don't close it down. And I can tell you, at least on the House side, there's not even the votes within the Republican caucus to do that. So for us to be holding up the budget or the process of the budget because if people want to close it down, to me is really bad policy. Let's talk about how we make it better and make sure that the 401k option is something that teachers actually want to have, because the way it's done right now, teachers don't want that system.
You know, I think what's really interesting is we had a very heated debate about this, about what we should be doing about the teacher pension system. But what's interesting now, it's actually holding up the state budget negotiations. And you talked a little bit about how Governor Snyder and the leadership here in the legislature, they're not really seeing eye to eye on this. And it's starting to put in jeopardy the fact of trying to get a budget done in June, which they've kind of flagged as the hallmark of, hey, look, we've been able to get this done and get it done ahead of time.
They've done it every time, and this is the first time that the legislature has basically rejected his budget and started over on their own. And I doubt they'll get it done by June. I don't think that the end of June. I don't think they'll work out their difference. It's more than just teacher pension. There, some in the legislature want to carve out money for an income tax cut, for example. I don't feel as if the governor has any sort of leverage in that caucus. He and Meekhoff get along fairly well, but on this pension reform issue, they're at odds. I mean, both of them understand that the status quo can't go on. You've got to come up with some big ideas for
fixing that. Well, that's what I said. I mean, they
system.
Philosophically agree in terms of you've got to change something.
I talked to the governor about this earlier today. He made a really great point about the fact that we had this debate when he was new in office and was diverting money to try to shore up the pension system, taking care of what was a real crisis at that point. But he said there's almost nobody left in the legislature today who was around when that happened just 6 or 7 years ago.
So what should we talk about term limits again?
It was 2012.
Right.
So he's like, it's like starting all over again, trying to make the case to people who don't remember the argument that we had before. I mean, the reason he has no leverage is because he can't build relationships that last.
He's got to start from scratch again.
But you know, there are ways to deal with this that are not draconian. I mean, if you just simply dealt with retirement age, given today's actuarial realities, you might want to raise the retirement age. You should raise the minimum retirement age, and teachers can now buy 5 years of retirement benefits so they can retire even earlier and stay with a full pension and stay on the public payroll, basically, for 40, 50 years.
One more thing before we leave the legislature conversation. The idea of floating the Detroit Educational Commission. Again, Mayor Duggan is talking about that. And I asked Senator Meekhoff about that. And he's like, well, there's some other priorities that I think that we take a look at, like maybe de-insurance, auto insurance there. What do you think about that idea in terms of getting through the legislature and the Detroit Education Commission?
Yeah, I don't know if it has a better chance. I know that the one person who sunk that and paid a lot of money to sink it is no longer in the picture, and I think that's what the mayor's calculus looks like. We'll see if the people she bought last year still feel like they owe her this year.
He's referring to Betsy DeVos. Right. I'm just going to read through the lines for everybody like that. All right, let's talk more about the governor. You know, Governor Rick Snyder gave Thursday's keynote address, focusing on the state's economic growth and what it will take to continue the momentum. In addition to moderating a panel on the governor's 21st Century Commission reports, I had a chance to talk one-on-one with him about the commission's finding on the economy, education, and infrastructure. This week it released the last 21st Century Commission report that you've been working on. And so there was one released on infrastructure in the fall, and then earlier this spring on education, and now this week on the economy. Do you finally feel that you have some kind of blueprint or the roadmap of where Michigan needs to be and actual things that we can accomplish and get done in the near term?
Yeah, Christy, that was one of the great parts of this. The economy was really the one to bring the other pieces together, because to have a strong economy, you need infrastructure and education. So they all fit together, they came together. This was done by a broad base of Michiganders, no partisanship involved. And it was to really say, let's stop thinking too short term. Let's think about the next couple generations and the world that we're facing and the opportunities and threats that we may have. And so I think they did a great job of pulling that all together, because it's not about having an answer for everything, but what are longer term things and what are actionable items, and we've already started on some of them. A great illustration on infrastructure. We already launched the integrated asset management pilot, which is about how do we get water and sewer people to work with road people, to work with our utilities, and coordinate that work. That can save a fortune in terms of resources because we need to invest more. Education, about competency-based learning, about saying how do you get more experiential kind of learning put in place. And we've got great things outside the classroom, but we need to bring more of those in the classroom. Things like FIRST Robotics, Square One, fabulous programs. And then on the economic front, what are some of these themes? And a couple of things that stood out. The need for broadband, particularly in rural parts of Michigan. It's a big economic opportunity because it's a great lifestyle. Who wouldn't want to live on the shorelines of one of the Great Lakes or one of our inland lakes? But if you don't have connectivity, economically, you probably can't make it happen.
Okay, so here's the thing. It's really interesting that finally we got that last report about the economy yesterday. They released the 21st Century Commission on the Economy in the state of Michigan. So now you have these 3 huge reports that really kind of look and say, look, hey, here's a 20-year plan, here's a 15-year plan. Not everything can get done tomorrow, but it's going to take some money, some time, and some resource. I think that's the next question about where's the disconnect between people in Michigan saying, gosh, I do want to pay for better water, I do want to pay for better roads, but where are we going to find the funding to get that done?
Well, I talked to John Walsh this morning about this, and he said they were waiting for all 3 reports to come in before they started developing policy initiatives. And he said they will be out over the next several weeks combing through these proposals to figure out what bills they can introduce now and get through realistically. The governor said yesterday he sees this primarily as a blueprint for future governors to follow. I don't know if you can count on that.
And that's what's interesting. You know, what's to say, and I even asked them today on the panel, what's to say that someone just doesn't take these on the shelf in 18 months and say, all right, we're going to put them here, and now I'm going to do another set of reports.
Count on that.
And Sandy Brua said, well, look, this is all based in data.
Yeah,
you know, we have these are hard numbers, and so you look at it, it's not partisan.
The economy report has a number of things in it that Lou Glazer of Michigan Future has been talking about for a long time. I mean, that's a Republican governor producing a report that someone on the pretty far left of sort of economic thinking is talking about. I think it's probably an opportunity for Democrats. The Democrats who are running for governor ought to pick that up and say, hey, let's make this the centerpiece of why we ought to get control of the governor's mansion next year.
Well, again, it's also, the political will in Lansing, if you want to start to change some policies that could help enact some of these things to happen, whether it be infrastructure, education, or the economy, Nolan.
I mean, they're not focused on these fundamental functions of government. They're very ideological up there. They're looking for, holding out for tax cuts in a state that already has a fairly low tax rate.
Yeah.
And, they can't get over sort of their mission, if you will, and get down to basic governance.
All right, well, I want to share some good news, some exciting. You guys got an award. Now, I got to put my readers on for this. You received the Liberty Bell Award presented by the Oakland County Bar Association to individuals whose community activity has strengthened the American system under the law and promoted a better understanding of the Constitution. Well, it doesn't get better than that, guys.
We want to thank Supreme Court Justice Bridget McCormick, who's in Southfield right now.
She accepted the award for you.
Our award on our behalf.
That's right.
Yeah, very nice.
Thanks,
well,
Bridget.
Congratulations, guys. Your civility has come shining through in some way, shape, or form, and I guess we can all figure it out at the bourbon party in just about an hour from now. All right, sounds good. And finally tonight, as you can imagine, there's a lot of food and drink being consumed here at the policy conference, and the guys from Under the Radar Michigan were curious about what it takes to feed hundreds of people. So they caught up with the chef at the Grand Hotel.
Hey, have you ever tried to make yourself a multi-course gourmet meal? I've tried. Wasn't pretty. But here at the Grand Hotel, they do it for hundreds of people every day. How do they do it? Let's find out. Chef Hans Bircher is a hands-on culinary craftsman who makes mouth-watering magic for hordes of hungry humans here at the Grand. And he does it with impeccable perfection. Most chefs cook a meal for a room full of people. You managed to orchestrate a meal, a gourmet meal, for hundreds of people at the same time. 5 words for you. How do you do that?
Being organized. That's it. That's it. Because like I was saying, last night we did 900 people in an hour and a half.
900?
You have to be organized, and I've been doing it for quite some time, and no problem.
How long have you been the chef?
I've been in the Grand Hotel for 33 years, and chef for about 25.
What's the biggest challenge for a chef like you, who's meticulous and serves that kind of food to so many people?
I opened the season up with probably 80% of new staff. So the training is probably what takes most of my time anyhow.
How many people work in that incredible kitchen you've got?
In the main kitchen I got about 110 And you know, it's all broken down into shifts, and but it's a 24-hour operation. We make our own breads, and so it doesn't stop, you know. And then, like I say, most of our staff is, you know, they're busy. It's like I say, a seasonal operation. It is packed with staff, and again, we're really staffed well.
Well, personally, I can't wait to eat your food.
Thanks.
Get back to work.
Thanks.
So, Christy, if you ever get the hankering to feed a few hundred humans, just do what they do here at the Grand Hotel. How hard can it be? Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really, how hard can it be? All right, that is going to do it for our coverage from Mackinac Island. Make sure you come back and see us tomorrow at MiWeek, MiWeek.org. We'll have the wrap-up of the conference, and, of course, at 7:30 p.m., an entire wrap-up of the week. I'm Christy McDonald for all of us at Detroit Public TV. We'll see you tomorrow from Mackinac.
Did you know? Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.